When we looked at the Cincinnati Bengals 2024 schedule, we saw an opportunity for a fast start. So, what are the Bengals going to do this offseason and in the preseason to make sure they capitalize on that opportunity?
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast covering your team every day. If you're new to the show, you can subscribe on YouTube anywhere you get your podcast. Makes it really easy to join the many thousands of Bengals fans out there that are everydayers keeping up on all things Bengals here on Locked On Bengals. And shout out to all of you who make us your first listen as well. James, today we dive into a classic Locked On Bengals mailbag, an off-season mailbag here. We're going to start with this big topic about getting off to a fast start, what they should do in the preseason. We'll talk as well about what's going on with the cornerback 2 battle as we're getting ready to really see that start in training camp. We'll have a couple other topics on defense and a little bit of a grab bag, some fun questions perhaps at the end of this show. But James, let's start with Ben Matersky. And apologies if we're not getting any names pronounced correctly, but Ben's wondering what the Bengals are going to change to avoid a slow start during the easiest part of the schedule, meaning the start of the schedule in 2024.
They are going to make sure, and they've acquired different remedies to make sure, including consulting with Chad Johnson, and you can Google what remedy he uses, but to keep all the ankles and wrists healthy for everybody, including Joe Burrow. And those that get the Chad reference will think it's funny. Those that won't, probably the majority of you won't. But health is it. The big Burrow, let's take it easy with him because it's June plan. It coincides with their plan to get off to a good start. The reason they didn't get off to a good start and lost to the Steelers 2 years ago had nothing to do with Pittsburgh. And yes, the Bengals should have won anyway. But if Joe Burrow doesn't have appendicitis, where not even appendicitis, if his appendix doesn't rupture because he's tough as hell and practiced through it before camp, well, then the Bengals beat the Steelers. And there's really no debate about that. I think even the Steelers deep down would know that. And last year, obviously, we know why they got off to the slow start with the calf and him battling through it. But it was a battle. It was a battle in Tennessee, even after they had won a game and kind of righted the ship to a degree. But do we think that if Joe Burrow was fully healthy, they lose not only to Cleveland, and maybe you think, oh, Cleveland's an awful matchup. Of course they lose to Cleveland. Well, then they don't lose the next week to Baltimore. They don't. They get off to a faster start in that game, and then they start 1-1, and then 2-1, and then who knows what happens in Tennessee. So I think the health part is number one. The last time Joe Burrow was healthy to start the season, they started strong in 2021 when really no one expected them to. He wasn't fully himself yet coming off of the ACL. So if you can get a healthy Joe Burrow, well, yeah, you're going to feel pretty darn good, I think, about your chances of getting off to a strong start, of being one of those elite teams from the jump and not have to make up ground like they did in November, December, the past couple of years. And last year, obviously, they fell short in December.
There are a couple of big factors. Health is one of the biggest, especially when you talk about Joe Burrow, the team's engine, the star quarterback that makes everything go. When you're a team that's driven by your quarterback being healthy, which is something that the Bengals have had to deal with more than most teams, is obviously going to be paramount to your team's success. Another big factor, I think, this year comparing to previous years where they had the slow starts, is this is the softest start to the schedule the Bengals have had when they've been good. When Joe Burrow has been this quarterback that we thought he would be, i.e. since his rookie season, really. The rookie season, COVID year, weird year. Rookie seasons where quarterbacks are bumpy, and his was bumpy in the end. Early for Zach Taylor in his career as well. Still a lot of questions there. Point is this a soft start to the schedule compared to what they've had when they've been seen as contenders? And that should help as well. Another thing that the Bengals could be doing, that something the Bengals control, is on the one hand, they started the offseason program a little bit earlier. They got a little bit more work in over the course of the offseason. And two, when you look at training camp and you look ahead to the preseason, the big question is this a year where you see the starters in the preseason? Where we've been asking this question for years, and we will ask this question again, and we will certainly hear and ask the coaches about this in training camp when we have the opportunities to do so. Is that something that actually matters? It's something that I've been pretty dismissive of, but it's something that the Bengals consistently have avoided, and they've had some slow starts. So you can't prove a negative or whatever the saying is, but there's reason to believe that you could try to get your starters a little bit of preseason run and see if that helps them hit the ground running in the regular season. What are your thoughts there?
I think that preseason wise, it's going to be such a topic. And I can already feel it. I bet the comments are about to start. You got to play in the preseason. You got to get out there. I'm the opposite, Jake, because that first one, the reason I mentioned the health, I don't want to see Joe Burrow out there in the preseason. And quite frankly, I don't give a damn if he wants to play in the preseason and wants those reps. Because you know what's more valuable than those reps is health. The lines, I think that'll be a big factor too, or a big topic. Oh, you got to play the lines together. Get Trent Brown some work. Do you? Like, do you have to do that? Are we sure that's why they started slow? And the answer to me is still no. I don't think that's why. And I think that they can start the year off with a win over the Patriots, and a win. By the way, 2-0 without playing their starters in the preseason. I think they can go to Kansas City week 2 and win. I don't think they need to play their guys a ton in the preseason. Part of that does have to do, and I do think it's interesting, the 2 joint practices, not 1 but 2, within a 10-day span, or less than that, like a week span. But you're talking about 10 days where they have to travel to Chicago, have a joint practice, have a preseason game. They come back, and then they're going to have a joint practice with the Colts, and then have that game. I think that's a lot. And so I think you can get really, really valuable reps in those joint sessions. And I'm not sure you need to play most of these starters, especially it's 3 preseason games. It's not 4 anymore. Let's handle some of these position battles. Some of the starters will play, of course, the ones that are trying to earn their keep and earn their spots. But I don't need to see Joe Burrow out there.
The preseason joint practice trend is growing. You're seeing increasing numbers of these across the NFL. This year in particular, I think we're seeing more teams with multiple joint practices with multiple other teams than we've seen that I can ever recall. And this could just be a replacement for playing your starters in preseason games for the teams that really don't believe in that. And I think the Rams are the other prominent example that I'm thinking of. Where does Zach Taylor come from? Obviously a connection there. If that's the plan, to get the starters work against other starters in a controlled environment to focus on the things that you want to work on in the preseason anyway, that's something that I think is a viable path for exploration that doesn't involve the injury risk that comes with preseason. At the same time, I would understand it if they wanted to get the guys out there for a series or 2. I actually don't see the point of just doing a series where maybe Joe Burrow hands the ball off and throws a couple screens like he did that one time where he's coming back off the injury. They just wanted to put him out there. I don't see the point of that sort of thing personally. But if they wanted to put them out there for a couple of series and had a plan, I wouldn't be aghast either. I wouldn't be totally opposed to it, but I also do understand your point, James, and agree that health is probably more important than those preseason reps, especially with this trend toward joint practices and the controlled and focused environment that those can be. Although that does tend to lead to some chippiness, as we've seen too with these joint practices over the years.
The one thing you could sell me on is wide receiver 3, that you want to iron that out, that there's multiple contenders and you want to see how they respond in a game setting with Burrow. And even then, they're all going to be active anyway, baby. If one fails, you get that one the hell out of there and you put the next one in.
And can't you just do that with Jake Browning? There are players that will play in the preseason, and
that's true.
So,
That's a good point. Is like the offense should function with Jake too. I'm not trying
yeah.
to cut you off, but it should function. We know what Jake brings. So.
And there are a number of players that will play in the preseason because there are a number of battles. And I think that will necessitate these guys playing. One of the bigger battles at cornerback, too, we will discuss coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. And maybe it's something as simple as filters for your engine. I almost forgot there. Or your engine air filter, one that I got for my Daewoo. Locked On Bengals listeners know what I'm talking about. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
James, let's talk cornerback 2. ST Palmy on Twitter is an everydayer and has a question specifically for you. He wants to know if he's right to interpret that you, James, became more open to Dax Hill winning the cornerback 2 job after watching that competition throughout OTAs and minicamp.
All right. So this is a tough one. And it's a tough one because when I say, oh, well, I think DJ Turner's ahead if the season started today, that's what I think they think. Me personally, I hope Dax Hill has a freaking all-pro year and shows everyone that he's a baller and you can play him at 52 different spots. It doesn't matter. He's still going to be really, really good because he's taken a lot of criticism. And I think he's been put in a really, really tough position during his first 2 years in the NFL. So me personally, there you go. There's some personal feelings. But it's still a really tough hill to climb. And I still think, yeah, pun intended, that he's – I don't want to say the non-favorite because it's probably like 50-50 or 51-49. But it's just, to me, knowing that DJ Turner has the skill set that he has, yeah, is he a little limited because of size? And we saw that? Sure. Is DJ Turner probably stronger than he was last year? Yes. Does he still have the ball skills that he had last year? Of course. All right. Well, then if the foot speed's still there, it is. Spoiler. He should be right there too. And I think people, kind of how they soured on Dax, have soured on DJ Turner. And I think both guys are going to be pretty good. I don't know if either one's going to be an all-pro at corner, but I think both guys are going to be pretty good and push each other. So I'm open to Dax winning the job. And I think it's realistic to think that he has a shot to. But I don't necessarily think my view has changed throughout camp, in mini camp in the offseason program, outside of Dax just straight up saying that he's comfortable and he's feeling good at that spot and knowing his mindset going into it, because that's such a big part of this and this position switch. So does he have a real shot? Absolutely. Am I more open to it? Maybe a little bit, I guess, like I said, because of talking to him and knowing where he's at mentally. But I still think it's going to be quite the battle. It's probably the battle of camp, Jake. If I had to predict, like, that is the battle that could go all the way down to the end of the line at camp. Obviously, punter would probably be the other one, but outside of that, I think cornerback 2, outside cornerback, starting cornerback is the number one camp battle.
Yeah, is there any other high stakes starting significant, like cornerback 2, cornerback 1? You're obviously going to have one guy that's better than the other, but those guys are both on the field for pretty much all your snaps. Is there any other position battle that we're anticipating at that level? Maybe Von Bell Jordan battle, but I mean, the way that it sounds, it doesn't sound like that's as up for grabs as CB2, which I think is entirely up for grabs, to the point of the question where this is a true battle. And I think that the openness to Dax winning the job is going to be I mean, there should be openness, I guess, because it's going to be predicated on how these guys perform
Oh,
through the
I
preseason
think there's
process.
openness for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
And it's not just necessarily, strength for DJ Turner or whatever. I mean, there's also going to be technical development that we're looking for from these players. There's going to be mental stuff. Probably the biggest factor is the mental aspect of the game, not blowing assignments, which is something that from the outside can be difficult to know. Like sometimes we can figure out where coverage busts come from, whose fault it is, but you don't know whether that's a communication breakdown and where the communication breakdown comes from, who made the mental mistake. And that's something that we won't always know. That's something that the coaches will certainly know. And it's going
Yep.
to be one of the biggest factors. But in addition to that, just the way DJ Turner finished the season, yes, he is a natural corner who's been playing corner, and that is an advantage for him. But a disadvantage for him, I would say, is that he just didn't finish the season well. And so he does have that to overcome. It's something that Lou Anarumo was open with talking about going back to the combine and the rookie wall comments. And so I do think that's a real competition, and it should be one of the more interesting competitions for a starting position, along with wide receiver 3, that we've seen in a Bengals preseason process in quite a while.
Yeah, I think the mental point is a good one because those that wanted Dax out at safety would have argued that you've had too many breakdowns, the deep balls, all of those things, that it was as much mental as anything where you're a step slow. And at corner, he's just kind of reacting. Like it's much easier. There isn't as much mental, it's more physical, and we saw that. And so if you're in favor of Dax is going to figure it out at corner and start and be a good quality starting corner on the outside this year, I think that's part of it, is he can lean on his physical traits, his God-given ability. He certainly has the size, speed, athleticism, all of those things, and has good ball skills too. So I'm not trying to dismiss it because he isn't the natural corner. I just think it's tough. But to your point, DJ Turner could have already locked up this job if he had ended the season strong. He didn't. So now he's competing for it, and he's going to have to prove it too. So I do think it's open, and maybe it's strictly 50-50. I know I said 51-49. Maybe it's fair to call it 50-50. And just to answer the question, make it clear, the reason I might be a little bit more open is, again, I think Dax Hill's approaching this from the correct way from a mental standpoint. By the way, DJ Turner, mentally, I think he's as confident as he's been. He didn't let the bumps at the end of the year specifically impact him at all. And that's how you have to be at corner. And so I think both guys are approaching it the right way. And odds are the Bengals are going to have to rely on both of them for significant snaps at outside corner this season.
Yeah, you think back to the draft, and if we were confident that DJ Turner was going to be the guy, we wouldn't have been talking about corner. And we weren't dismissing corner even in the first round where we thought offensive tackle was the favorite, and obviously it was. We ended up mocking Amarius Mims in the predictive mock, of course, but we talked about corner. We talked about Quinyon Mitchell. We talked about Terry Arnold. We were discussing
I think
those
Mitchell
guys
was
at
on
various
their
points.
list of guys that they would have
Yeah.
considered taking. Yeah.
And so if they didn't feel like they needed a corner, they didn't feel like they needed this competition, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I do think, just thinking back to our approach to what we thought they would do in free agency, what we thought they would do in the draft, where we thought they would look for additional depth and skill, corner was on the list. And that speaks to the nature of the competition they'll have. It'll be interesting to see how these guys react to it in the preseason. There are going to be specific things we're going to be looking at for, technical improvement, for feel for the position improvement for both of these guys, for understanding their assignments. And we will get a feel for that stuff in the preseason, which is why these guys are going to play. I think another guy that's going to play in the preseason is probably Myles Murphy, as he looks to take that second year jump. And we continue to look for some stars on this defense, where Trey Hendrickson is a clear star on this defense right now, but a few of their other stars in recent years are no longer on the team, and they're looking for that next generation. Let's discuss that topic coming up next.
Let's keep the mailbag rolling, Jake, with a two-parter. or at least two comments. At Sarge Houday asks, outside of Trey Hendrickson, what player on defense has the best chance to make an all-pro team this season? And Jeff, he's listed as Jeff, but he's at George Porridge, asks, what are realistic expectations for the growth of Myles Murphy? What would you want to see in training camp or preseason from the second-year defensive end?
Yeah, let's start on the topic of Myles Murphy. We've talked about him several times pretty extensively in this offseason, looking for that second-year leap, looking for that Rashawn Gary pathway, or pick your other favorite developmental, freaky athletic defensive end prospect who broke out early in their career. What you're looking for to see that from Myles Murphy in the preseason and in training camp when we get to the padded parts of training camp and those joint practices and that time of year is you're looking for a consistent pass rush plan. And you started to see this from Murphy a little bit, specifically in the pass rush. That's what I'm going to focus on here. You started to see this a little bit from Murphy late in the year where he starts to string moves together, starts to set some moves up, starts to do more than try to run through or run around a guy. And that's where he started to have some success down the stretch. You start to see that technical improvement and that mental improvement. We're talking about that again here with Myles Murphy, like we talked about it with the corners, and that plan coming together to use his athletic traits in a way that, you need to do in the NFL. Nobody's winning in the NFL on pure athleticism. You have to have the chess game, the game within the game, the setup moves and the counter moves, and have those string of moves that you're going to put together to win as a pass rusher. And Myles Murphy that's a clear area for him where I'm going to be looking for that development early and often. And if he shows that he's got an improved plan there, then I'll feel pretty good about Murphy going into the season. But when I set this segment up, James, I was talking about looking for players to go along with Trey Hendrickson. We've seen Jesse Bates depart. We've seen DJ Reader depart in the last few years. Those guys were the other stars of this defense in recent years. You could make an argument for Mike Hilton as well. And I love what Mike Hilton did last year. And anyone who listens to this show every day knows how we feel about Mike Hilton, especially down the stretch last year. But what do you think? Is there another all-pro potential player on this defense? Because I have a hard time finding it personally without a surprising, which would be a very pleasant surprise, but a surprising leap from somebody here that I'm not anticipating.
Yeah, I think it's all pro is tough, right? I think Pro Bowl.
Trey isn't even an all pro.
That's all pro is really tough. Like, let me know when Joe Burrow's an all pro, right? Like it's tough. And so I think all pro is probably too high. But could Cam Taylor-Britt be a Pro Bowler? Or Dax Hill, for that matter, or DJ? Like, could they get to that level? I think Cam is the one of the corners that would do that. Obviously, Mike Hilton could be in that mix. Could Sheldon Rankins? Pro Bowl? Maybe. It's pretty stacked. DJ Reader found that out. Like, DJ Reader wasn't a Pro Bowler, and he should have been, but he wasn't. So it's tough. So I think maybe you go with a Logan Wilson or a Jermaine Pratt. Like, maybe they're that dominant. But I think the thing that has made this Bengals defense so good, it's just at every level they had really solid dudes that were making plays and knew their role. And last year they kind of lost their way a little bit. Maybe it's as simple as saying Geno Stone, though. Coming in, he has another 7 interception season. He puts fires out. He becomes Geno Bates, basically, as replacing Jesse Bates, and can be that guy. Maybe it is that simple, and that's the guy that we should be pointing to as the guy that could do that. I certainly think he could be a Pro Bowler if there is one this year. I would probably say him or Cam Taylor-Britt are the two most likely non-Pro Bowlers that could become Pro Bowlers.
Yeah, looking at the entire team for an All-Pro, it's
Jamar.
hard to. Yeah, Jamar, maybe Joe Burrow if he has an excellent season, but obviously making All-Pro at quarterback is extremely hard. I think Burrow's capable of it, but it's like Burrow and Chase.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah.
If you're really reaching, I think the next most likely guy on defense would be a freak outbreak season from Myles Murphy. And he just goes crazy just because he has the athletic tools to do it. and we haven't seen what his potential could be in the NFL, where outside of that, I think you have a lot of known quantities on the defense. If there was a slot corner all-pro, I would make a case for Mike Hilton, but he hasn't been a
Sure.
Pro Bowler in his career. And so it's hard to make cases for any of these guys to be all-pro when you have to make a case for them to be Pro Bowlers. And they do have guys that have been to Pro Bowls, obviously, on this defense, but Sheldon Rankins never has, if you're talking about. And so, like, him making a Pro Bowl at this point would be a late first Pro Bowl, and I hope he does, obviously. Geno Stone, I think that's a good idea as well. But I think finding an all-pro period where Trey Hendrickson didn't get, did he get one single or did he get no all-pro votes? I think it was none, despite having a pretty excellent season as a pass rusher. And if he can't get a single vote, I'm having a hard time finding an all-pro period on this team.
Yeah.
Maybe Evan McPherson is another one, if he has a great season where you could see that happening.
Sure. No, I would agree with Evan. Certainly. I think he's one of the best kickers in the NFL. Could certainly do that. I think it might be that simple, right? Is Evan McPherson, maybe Trey Hendrickson, and then you're opening up offense. It's Jamar Chase, it is Joe Burrow, and then there is the scenario, and I'll just throw it out there because I do think he's that talented. He could go off for 1,510 touchdowns. Like, he could.
I don't know if that's enough at wide receiver. You get 2.
Yeah.
Like 1,510 last year is not an all-pro. That's behind the all-pros last year. It's hard at wide receiver.
That's true. It's really hard. And I guess the other one, could Orlando? He's been a Pro Bowler a ton.
He could. I think that's really hard. He would have to be the best version of himself. I just think that he's the quintessential, his good years are Pro Bowl years, and the athletic limitations probably keep him out of the all-pro spots in the eyes of the voters.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty strong influence on who gets voted for all-pro on offensive line, where Orlando Brown doesn't seem like the type of player who that group would typically call an all-pro.
Yeah. If he's a Pro Bowler, I think we'd
be stoked.
Everyone would sign up for that. And he was a 4-time Pro Bowler going into last year. So we'll see. But who knows? Maybe Joe Burrow will be an all-pro. We certainly don't want to see him at the Pro Bowl because, well, for obvious reasons. That being said, we have seen him in France. And he was in this week, the French Riviera had an event there, and he was seen playing chess, which goes with our final question of the mailbag, as I lost it, but now I found it. Robbie at Rob Bob UK5. Rob Bob asks, and he's a loyal listener and question asker of the mailbag. Jake, what do you think Joe Burrow's go-to opening chess move is?
Well, the most popular chess move for master plus level chess players in the history of recorded chess games, according to chess.com, is e4, which is a king's pawn moving 2 squares.
You cheated. Oh my God.
I don't know why Joe Burrow wouldn't play e4. I don't know what Joe plays. I don't know what Joe's chess.com account is. I wish I did. Do you think you could beat Joe? I think like in a 10-game series, I would get maybe a couple. I'm pretty rusty right now. I think that he probably plays more than me on a regular basis.
Yeah, you haven't played. You at least haven't mentioned it to me.
Yeah,
in a while.
Yeah, it's a frustrating game. Chess is such a hard game where you can do everything right. I mean, this is like the NFL, I guess. This is like a lot of games. You can do everything right for a lot of moves, and then you make one mistake and you lose a game on the spot.
Interception.
Yeah, it's like you throw a pick six when you're up. You throw a pick six and they get a 2-point conversion or something, and you're up 7, and for some reason you're throwing the ball with a minute left in the game. It's like that kind of thing where it's entirely your fault. You have no one to blame but yourself for making the mistake, and you just lose the game on the spot.
It's like offensive line. We were just talking about Orlando Brown Jr. Like, if you give up 1 sack and you're great on 59 out of 60 snaps, but that 1 sack is the game-changing play, well then,
yeah. Well, think about Jonah Williams, like generally was okay last year and gives up the hit that we think caused Joe Burrow's wrist injury, and that colors the perception of Jonah Williams forever for Bengals fans.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think E4. I don't think Joe's innovating opening moves too much in chess. I think the classics strike me as something that Joe play. I should have looked closer at the Instagram photo. I didn't notice if any pieces had been moved to try to extrapolate what the opening might have been. But King's Pawn, E4. I think that's the go-to for Burrow. Somebody will have
That's
to
what you
ask that
noticed.
question.
Yeah, that's fine. I can ask him.
Yeah.
You know what I noticed in that picture?
The chess picture?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was not wearing sleeves.
Joe's freaking shoulders are as big as your waist, Jake.
That was the first comment
Ooh.
from a thirsty fan as well. Notice
The thirsty fan. I'm not thirsty. I'm just saying, he's been putting in that work.
I'm just saying it was also the first thought of the thirsty fan.
Joe, when you get back into town, hit me up. We'll get a lift in.
Okay. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Next time, we've got a series starting for you. If we get all our ducks in a row, the most important Bengals for the future of this franchise. Hopefully that will be what we bring you next week. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.